Hi guys, Brenton here with RevitFamily.biz, and I'm here today to show you all of the upgrades we've made to our window families. But before I do that, I want to say thank you to you all for your feedback. Um, I love the feedback. It makes it so that these windows are better for everyone. So thank you. All of these changes were changes that were requested by you guys, the users. So without further ado, let's look at what we've done. So the first big change is I've added 16 more families. And so let's look at the different families and their features, and then we'll talk about the other more minor changes that I've made. So the first family that I've added is just a simple skylight. Nothing too fancy about this family, but you can change its width, height, and curb offset, like the curb height. So that one's pretty straightforward. Then the other one I've added are, well, there's two. They're these folding windows. So they kind of accordion open, similar to a bifold door. And this is something I've seen lately in the industry. We've started to see these folding windows. I've used them on a project. In fact, let me show you. This was before I made the windows, so I kind of had to use, I've faked this window, but you can see there's a kitchen here, and then the dining room's here, and then out here is a big deck, a big covered deck, and they wanted this to be an outdoor eating area. And so we've got a grill and a countertop. It's kind of like a bar outside. And in between the kitchen and this eating area is this folding window, which allows them to open up this window entirely, and they use it as a pass-through when they're eating outside. So that's how I've used this particular window. There's probably other ways to use it, but if we look in floor plan, you can see there's two flavors of the folding door. There's a double-sided, so it opens from the middle to the sides, or you can do a one-sided, like the example I just showed you, if you want the windows to just stack on one side rather than two. And they're fully parametric, and it'll calculate automatically the number of panels you would need. Or if you don't like the way it's calculating the panels, you can override it. So let's just change the width here. Oh, so I'd have to change the type, sorry. So let's change it from 6 to 8. We'll click OK, and it'll update. This one takes a little bit longer. Sorry. It'll update to, so it wants it to be 4 panels. And if I change it back to, oops. Change it back to 6 feet. It should go from 4 to 3. Again, it takes just a minute to change this one. It does a lot of thinking to calculate those panels. And so you can see if it's an odd number, it'll just pick one side to give the odd number to and the other side to give the even number to. You don't have that same problem with the one-sided, but basically if you don't like the way it's done it, you can flip it. If you want the one panel to be on the other side, you can flip it. Or, like I said, you can override how many panels. So if we want a 6-foot window, but we want there to be, instead of 3 panels, we want it to be 4, we can click here and we can override it. It says number of panels. Its default is 0. If you put it at 0, nothing's overridden. The family will calculate it on its own. But if you don't like the way it's doing it, we can set it to 4 here, and it will update the family to have 4 panels instead of 3, just like that. So both of these folding windows work very similar to one another. All right, then the whole rest of the families are window group families. So one of the things I've been getting requests about is apparently people are liking to really group their windows, similar to what you're seeing here. And you guys have expressed the fact that it's annoying, one, to have to place all those windows, and two, you want that group of windows to schedule as one window, and you also want to be able to tag it as one window instead of, you know, a bunch of windows. So like for instance, this one, we've got 5 windows with 5 transoms, so that's 10 windows. So 10 windows that you have to place, and then if you try to tag this or schedule it, you have to do it with 10 different windows. Now you can schedule the whole thing as one window, but you still have the option of scheduling it as 10 if you want. So you can schedule them individually or as a group, and you can tag them individually, or you can just tag the group. And I can show you that real quick. So before I show you that, basically on this bottom row here, you just see, you know, 2 to 5 windows grouped. If you are using more than 5 windows, that's cool. You can still do that individually. You can build them like you used to. But these families, the reason I cut it off at 5 is because it begins to become ridiculous as far as processing time to change it. So these windows take a little bit of time to change. I'm just going to warn you, because you have to think, like for instance on this one that's got 5 windows and 5 transoms, you're changing 10 windows when you make a modification to this. So if you change the size, or you know, the trim or the mullions, it's got to do it times 10. So it's not a big processing time. We're talking maybe like 10 to 15 seconds, but we're used to things happening instantly when we change them in Revit, when we modify family. And most of my families, I try to get to that, you know, 1 second change level, but these ones are so complicated that it will take, you know, could take 10 to 30 seconds to make the changes once you change the parameters. So I'll give you that caveat. But if I kept going with these, it becomes crazy. So I've cut it off at 5. You guys can let me know if you're using more than 5 windows, but if you are, you still always have the option of building these same window systems in the case, you know, that you do. But I think what I have covers, I'm hoping, 90% of everyone's scenarios. All right, so the first row is just groups of windows. The second row is groups of windows with a transom up above, individual transoms up above. And then this last row is windows, but they all have one transom that spans all of the windows. So I think this will cover most of your scenarios. Let's take a look at them really quickly. So let's look at the most, well, to save on time, let's look at, you know, let's do three windows and 3 transoms. So if you click on this, what you're going to do is you're going to edit the type, and then you get all of these parameters. And the way I've broken it up to try to help organize this, because basically all the settings you have for a normal single window, I've also still given you in this group, but it's organized by window. So for instance, we start under, normally I put everything under graphics or dimensions or materials. If a user should change a parameter, that's where I put it. Graphics are things that have to do with the way the window looks or functions. Materials are obviously materials, and then dimensions, just only dimensional parameters are here. Those are the only 3 categories I normally use when I make all of my families. But in this case, because we had so many windows and each window has so many graphic parameters, I also use this category called set. And I did that simply so that I could put all the transom options into this group, and you can collapse it. So, because it gets pretty extensive. By the time you get to 5 windows and 5 transoms, you can imagine how long these are. So you can collapse them. So basically set equals transom parameters. So if you want to see the transom parameters, expand sets. And then I have tried to organize it by window. So it just goes, if you're looking at the exterior of the window, it just goes from left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like that. So transom 1 would be would be this transom right here. Transom 2 would be the middle one, and transom 3 would be the very right. So that's what we're looking at here, transom 1. So some of you have all the options for this window that you do for all the other windows, the single windows. You can change the type. If you want a different kind of mullion, you can do just horizontal mullions, vertical mullions. If you're in the other styles, you know, there's prairie, and then there's craftsman. So you'll get your mullion options here, and you can pick if it's, do you want it to be an awning, do you want it to be a casement, do you want it to be double hung, you know. So in this case, all of the transoms in this group I've put as awnings, so they just open up from the top, like for ventilation. So then furthermore, you can choose to show the mullions or not show the mullions. You can override the mullions, which we'll get to later. This is a new feature. Anyways, all of the Windows graphical settings are right here. And then you move to the next window, Transom 2, Transom 3. So if we collapse that, we can go into graphics, and that's just the windows and the trim around the whole group. So here we go again. We got window 1, all of its parameters, window 2, all of its parameters, window 3, all of its parameters. And again, you can change to any kind of window you want, slider, folding, fixed, double hung. Then at the very bottom it says overall graphics, and this is for the whole group. So this is where you would change the trim. So if you wanted a different kind of trim on the interior or a different kind on the exterior, you would do it here. If you want to, you know, make some invisible or visible, that's where you do it. And then materials and finishes, similar, these functions similar to the other windows. And then dimensions, I didn't put in groups like window 1, 2, and 3 because there's really just a couple options. There's the width, and then the space between the window 1 and window 2, and then the space between, you know, then the width of window 2, then the space between window 2 and 3, and that's where you'll change it. So it just goes in order. So window 1, this window 1 space, 2, window 2 space, 3. So the order that it's in here from top to bottom is the same order left from right, looking at the exterior of the window. And then of course you can pick the height of the transom window and then the space between the transom windows and the lower windows. And then everything else here on out looks pretty much like the single families that you're already used to using. So if we just want to make some changes to see how that looks, let's just make our middle window 4 feet wide, and we can make our side windows 2.5 feet wide, and then let's just put a 2-inch gap instead of a 4-inch gap between the windows. And let's change our outside trim. Let's make it you know, colonial style. We click OK. Like I said, we're changing 6 windows, and they're nested windows, so it has to go in, open that nested window family, make the changes, bring it back into this family. You know, so it takes some processing time, but it's way faster than changing all 6 windows yourself. So there we go. You saw it. That was about, I don't know, 10 to 15 seconds, and now we have a new window. It's changed, you know, the sizing of the windows and the spacing. You can see it's now 2 inches in between instead of 4. We've got our new trim on the outside. So it's just that easy. Okay. The other thing I was going to show you is tagging. So let's go to a floor plan. So now we've got this window showing, and it's kind of, right now it's a little confusing because it's showing the transoms. The transoms are awning windows, which is what's given us this symbol, and then the left and the right are casement windows. But this will be good enough. Let's just go to the neighboring group. So if I hit tag to tag these windows, by default, it's going to tag the whole window. And then, so if I clicked now, it would be showing a tag for the entire window. If I tab, it'll give me the individual windows. So I can either do it overall. Let me just fix that real quick. I can do an overall tag up above and then individual tags below, if that's how you want to do it. So you have both options, and then if we go to a schedule, let's do a window schedule here. This is a little confusing because I haven't filtered it yet, but what happens is anything that says nested window, see these nested windows, those are, let's jump back to our floor plan. These that we've marked, these that are inside the group, those are called nested windows. So and then the group, you can see here it says window group, and then it describes 4 windows, 4 transoms. So if we want to look at our schedule, you're going to have to do some filtering. Let's see, window schedule. So we would have to, if we wanted to see the individual windows, we would have to filter out anything that says group in front of it. So all these that say window group, okay, that's the full window. So here's our window group that's 4 windows, 4 transoms. That's what we're looking at right now. But then inside that group are picture windows. So those are all fixed windows, all 8 of those. And those show up as a nested window fixed. So that's part of, if we did a count, it would be part of this count. So depending on what you want to do, you'll still have to do some, creative filtering in the schedule, but you now have the option to schedule one or the other, or you can schedule both if you want. Okay, those are the big changes. We can now go over some of the more minor tweaks that have been requested. So one of the items I get, and I understand as far as a usability issue goes, is some of the parameters before were type parameters. I have changed some type parameters to instance parameters. So that helps with like the ease of use on Windows. So one such example is, let's just go to, this is an awning window. It used to be that if you wanted to shut off the mullions, that was a type parameter. So you would have to go into your type dialog box, you'd have to duplicate this window and create a new one, and you would shut off the mullions. But I don't think not showing the mullions constitutes a different window type. The window's still the same dimensions it was before. It's still the same style. All you're wanting to do is shut off the mullions. So that is now out here in the instance parameters. So now we can, if we go to graphics, show mullions, we can click off that, and now the mullions disappear. Another thing was the materials. Those used to be type parameters, but changing the material of a window I don't think constitutes a different window type. So why not just allow you to change it out here? If you want to change all of the windows, if the argument for keeping it as a type is that if I wanted to change all of the windows that are an awning window, I wanted to change all of their material, then you could just go into the type and change it once and it would change them all. And the argument for keeping it in the type was that you want to change them all across the entire project. But you can still do that. If you go to an awning window and I just right click and do select all instances, let's do an entire project. You can see down here it's selecting 3. I can still make that change all at once to all of the windows in the project, but still have the flexibility of just doing it to 1. So to me, I've made that change to quite a handful of parameters. So like if you want to like the trim, showing it or hiding it, the symbols in plan. There's a number that I didn't think constituted you having to change the type. If you just wanted to change one parameter, it doesn't make sense that you'd have to create a whole nother window type. So any of those parameters I pulled out of type and put into instance. So that should make using modifying the windows easier, especially if there's one-off situations, but you don't want to create a whole new type. Okay, so that should improve things a little bit. Then the other thing I got a ton of requests for, and I don't know why I didn't do it from the beginning. It seems so elementary. I have my reasons, but you would all, like 90% of you have requested that the mullions be adjustable, like the amount of mullions horizontally and vertically. And right before this update, the family would calculate it automatically. And I did that because I wanted to make sure you guys didn't get errors. So for instance, if you changed the size of a window to a smaller size, it would often, if you had put in a bunch of mullions, if you had picked the number of mullions to be really a lot, and then you squoze the window down, it would error out for you, and then you wouldn't know why the window's breaking. So what I did was I built in some logic so that when the window shrinks, it also recalculates how many mullions need to go in there. And so I thought I was doing it to help usability and to keep people from getting frustrated, but I just created a new frustration. So now what happens is it's still, when you change the size of the window, it still will automatically calculate the mullions for you so that you don't get the error. But now if you click on the window, you have the option of overriding the logic. So right now, you click on the window, and if you look over under graphics, there's a number of horizontal mullions and a number of vertical mullions parameter. And by default, they're set to 0. If it's set to 0, it will do the default logic. Anything greater than 0, it will override the logic. So now, if we just wanted one horizontal mullion in here, it will just put in one horizontal mullion. And it just takes how many you put in and spaces it evenly across the window. So if we wanted 6, we could also put in 6. And so now you can have the functionality you wanted, but the lack of breaking and problems that I wanted. So I hope that helps all of you guys. The other thing you can do now is, and this was in the previous version, but I've never pointed it out before, but if you have the craftsman style, you'll notice the vertical mullions, if you override that, it's not going to do anything because there is only one vertical mullion. But below that one, there's an override craftsman. It's a really long name. Override craftsman mullion top offset. It's a mouthful, but all it does is it overrides right now this horizontal mullion in the craftsman style. It's set to do the 1/3 rule. So if the window is 3 feet tall, it's going to go 1 foot from the top, and then 2/3 is below it. So it basically divides it in thirds. But there are times when you don't want it to do that, and in that case, you can put in whatever value you want. So if we wanted 6 inches, we could put 6 inches, and it'll adjust the horizontal mullion to be 6 inches. And then you can also change the amount of horizontal mullions. So if we wanted 1, and this is something to point out, it treats each panel of the window as its own entity. So if I put in 2, it's actually going to put in 4. So I'm just going to show you that. So let's change it to 2 vertical mullions. And you can see it puts 2 in each panel of the window. You don't have that same problem if there's only one panel. But okay, so there's an example of the overrides. Okay, the next thing is windows where there are 2 panes. I've made some adjustments there. So this happens on double hung, double casement, and the folding well, not so much the folding. Mostly the foldings, because there can be an infinite number of panels on those, it doesn't work quite the same. But let's take, for instance, the double hung. You now have more options, because something I was getting is, let's go to the prairie style. I was getting requests that you couldn't quite do what people were wanting to do with the prairie style. So for instance, what I'm showing here is we're treating both panes as if they were one window. So you can see the pattern continues over the whole window. But it was brought to my attention that that's not always what you want. So in that case, you can change what's happening. So let's go in here and let's change the top mullion. Right now they're set to a half pattern. So you can see window mullions, prairie half top and prairie half bottom. We can change that now to maybe we just want a prairie style in both panels. So I'm going to apply just to show what that looks like. So now instead of that pattern stretching across two panels, each panel has that pattern in it. Okay, so that was something that was requested. The other thing you can do is, if you just want the prairie mullions in the top window, you can do that too, or just the bottom. So now over here under show mullions, there's a show top mullions and a show bottom. So let's just hide the bottom. And now you have a sliding, a double hung sliding window that only has the pattern in the top. You could do it for only the bottom as well. Then for the slider window, or like a double casement window, you can do that similarly. You can share the pattern across the whole window, or you can put it in just one side. You have both of those options now. Here's the double casement, and here's the slider. So they both work similarly. Then on the craftsman style, what's going on is, you can see we're treating this double hung window as if it's one window. Both panes are one window. If you don't like that, you can click on it, and all I've done is hidden the bottom mullion, but if you show the bottom mullion, then you get the craftsman panel going on in both windows, and then you would just adjust the default height, something like that, if you wanted to make those changes. So that is a small tweak that we've made, but I've got that request probably a couple times. So it's a minor change, but hopefully that helps you guys. Okay, the other thing that I've done is I've made an adjustment to the way the trim visibility works. So before I had, if we clicked on a window, you could, oh, this is not, because it's a grouped window. Let's go to a non-grouped window. So right here, for example, what would happen is you could go over here and it says show trim exterior, and it would have showed show trim interior. You just had an option for interior, option for exterior. And if you unchecked it, it would hide the whole trim, all of the trim. Now you have the option of hiding the seal portion of the trim separately from the rest of the trim from the other three sides. And the reason I did that is twofold. One, you guys requested it, and two, there are instances where this is very helpful. So like if we were on the inside here, and by default you can see we're trimming out the entire window. Well, it's common not to trim out a whole window. We often just put in a seal. So in this case we could click on the window and go to interior trim, and we're just going to uncheck show trim. Okay, so now that takes it off three of the sides and only shows the seal, and it readjusts the seal size so that it fits the window rather than just taking away. If we just took away the trim, then the seal would be too, it would look funny, it would be too wide. So it readjusts the seal and only shows the seal. So that could be useful on the interior. It's also useful on the exterior in the case that say we had a wainscot of stone with this brick, and so up to 3 feet or whatever height you have stone, and then you have a transition strip running across. So let's just put a wall sweep there to simulate this. So say you had something like this. Now look, all the windows that you've placed are conflicting with your transition strip. And so now you have the power to just turn off the seal of the window, and now it's not conflicting with your strip, your transition strip. So minor change, but you can see how it would be useful in a project. Okay, another thing that's minor that I did get requests for is if we open up the type parameters, there's a rough width and height. And what this used to be, this value used to be the opening size of the hole that Revit cuts inside the wall. So it's just kind of, it was more of like a Revit setting I was using, like I said, to control the hole that was being cut in the wall. And it didn't necessarily reflect the rough framing opening dimension. And it was brought to my attention that some people use the rough width and height in their drawings. And so to correct that, what I've done is I've added a new parameter called rough opening clearance. And you can choose what the gap around all of the window is, how big that gap is, and it will automatically calculate the rough width and height based on the actual width and height of the window. So you can see here we wanted a 1 1/4 inch gap around the entire window, so that makes the overall width and overall height 2.5 inches bigger than the actual dimension of the window. Just because I think that's pretty much framing standards, is to frame it 2.5 inches bigger. But if you frame differently, or in your region they do it a little bit differently, you can now change this to whatever space you want. Okay, again, a minor change, but you requested it, so I did it for you. More changes are in, now if we go to the plan view, let's just go to the second floor view. Okay, we've added now the motion symbols in plan. In elevation, we always had the motion symbols, so if you had a casement door that was opening, we had the markings to show that it was a casement window. But something we didn't have was in plan view, were these dotted lines. So now all of the operable windows have their motion symbols in plan so that you can see that. So we can see this is awning, this is a double hung window. You can see the second plane is dotted to show that it's up above. This is a slider window. Then we've got our double casement, our single casement, and then our 2 folding doors. So now we can see clearly in plan what's happening. And if you don't like that, you can always click on the window, and now there is a parameter called show slide symbol in plan. You just have to click that off and it gets rid of that for you. And then in like the casement windows, you can not only show and hide the symbol, you can also change the swing angle. So now you have a lot more control of how these windows look in plan. The other thing we did was, if you change, you can see right now the window frames, the trim around the window showing in plan by default. And now if you go down here to the detail level of the view and you change it to coarse, in coarse detail level, the frames or the trim around the window no longer shows. So now you can see you get a really clean looking plan view. And if I turn on the line weight, you can see it looks like a very traditional clean plan view. So you have that minor option thrown into the mix. All right, the last thing, or one of the last changes we made, was just a minor naming. Used to be the windows, if you looked at the naming, it was kind of like, you know how we say, you know, a 3050 window, so meaning 3 feet 0 inches wide and 5 feet 0 inches tall. So 3050, same with the door, 3080 or 386. Anyways, that's how we used to name them. So this window that's, let's just pick this one, that's 36 inches wide and 60 inches tall, used to be a 3050. That's what the naming convention was. We've switched that to be more consistent with other families, for sure with our other families. And now, I mean, most families, the sizing is usually in inches. And so we found it was confusing for people because this 36-inch wide, 60-inch high, when you just write it out 3050, it looked like a 30-inch wide, 50-inch tall window. And so it was confusing. So we've renamed the type names so they're less confusing. Okay, that's all the changes, guys. I know that was a lot. Thanks for bearing with me, but I hope this makes all of your modeling way faster. We love to hear your comments. Continue to give us feedback. The last thing you need to know is how to upgrade these, and it should be easy. I've been told by the person that does my website that it should be as simple as logging into our store. So go to revitfamily.biz, and you're going to log in with your same credentials that you originally set up your account with. When you log in, you should be able to see your purchases. And if you've already bought the families, your purchase is there. All you have to do is re-download the file. If this is not what's happening for you, please contact me through the contact page, and we will fix the problem for you and we will get you upgraded. But the upgrade is free for everyone. I know normally we only do it for free if you bought it within the year, but I think I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your feedback. So everyone gets this upgrade. You just need to go in and download it. Thanks for using us. Thanks for being customers. Thanks for giving us feedback. Happy modeling, and we'll talk to you next time.